As has been said, I've been working in the Solomon Islands since the beginning of, well, for the last year, over a year now. And since the beginning of this year, I've been spending a lot of time in Honiara. And I do want to congratulate the government of Australia and the governments of the Pacific Forum, because Ramsay, as many Solomon Islanders see it, has restored law and order and has created the enabling environment that the Solomon Islands and her people need. However, the challenge for the next 4 years is to build the capacity of Solomon Islanders to take ownership of their country and also the leadership required. And that is something that we're working on under Ramsay too. The onslaught of the global financial crisis is, in my view, a further illustration of how the credit crunch has impacted on our economies. It's being said that we in the Pacific haven't really felt it, but I can tell you in Fiji, amongst our other problems, we've really begun to feel it, and it's only the beginning, I believe. When President Obama referred to this problem as caused by arrogance and greed, there is a message here to our leaders: be watchful of the problem of arrogance and greed. The fragility of Pacific Island states requires a rethink of development models that have emanated from Western ideology promoted by institutes like the World Bank and IMF. And in my way of thinking, the rising poverty, the increasing gap between rich and poor, climate change impacts has exactly to do with the type of development models we have been pursuing, the type of government system we have been running, the alienation of land and resource owners from managing and controlling their natural resources. Hence, my saying, we need to rethink it. I am not saying that, that all needs to be put aside, but I think that we need to look at the linkages between all of these issues. We can't just talk about climate change there, the credit crunch there, the Pacific economy is there, because I believe it all has to do with development models that we have been pursuing. Solutions, in my view, must involve making available working capital to resource owners to engage with government, with developers, to turn our natural resources, our assets, into equity and wealth, and having control over those assets rather than having it largely foreign controlled. Number 3, in resolving the problems confronting us in the Pacific Islands region, now more than ever before, we need close collaboration between government, non-government organizations, and the churches or civil society as we now know it. Long before Pacific governments came into being, and for many of us it's only in the last 30 years that we know of the term government, long before governments came into being, the churches have always, in the Pacific, played a key role in the provision of social and community services. And they still do, especially with schools and education and hospitals, health services. Apart from providing these services, I believe very strongly that the prophetic voice of the Church in the Pacific needs to come into focus with respect to social justice. In the name of development, many of our communities are experiencing introduction of values and forms of governments that are disrespectful of human dignity, human rights, and social justice. The Church and other civil society organizations must now work hand in hand with democratically elected governments to consolidate targeted responses to our social and economic problems. And Bob, I was in Honiara, and when Prime Minister Rudd came to launch Partnership for Development, and I thank the Government of Australia, because I think the notion of partnership with, I think for too long Australia has been a donor to, that concept is like doing something to, whereas partnership is doing something with. And I like the ring of that. And my key messages tonight is about doing it with us, for us, involving us in it. The enduring impacts of climate change on our small Pacific Island states need serious attention. And I believe that our leaders in next month's forum must come to grips with this. I'm pleased to know that One Just World will have a specific forum dedicated to this, so I will not delve into it except to say there has been a lot of advocacy at that high level, there isn't enough at the community awareness level. Sharing information at the community level, especially within Pacific communities, and specific focus be given to mitigation and adaptation measures. Because for many of our island states, many of our island communities, it is already happening. Rising sea level, food insecurity, a lot of this is on our doorsteps. And I don't believe many people really have understood the intensity and seriousness of it. While the Pacific Conference of Churches have taken the lead in discussing resettlement and forced migration, there is so much more that needs to be done. And my message to the Cairns meeting is for Pacific governments to give specific focus to this. In concluding, I take this opportunity to again thank the government and the people of Australia, AusAid, World Vision and International Women's Development Agency for investing in such forums as this to bring information and knowledge to contribute to the theme of durable peace and prosperity in our Pacific Islands region, and for all of us a place we can call home. It is never easy for many Pacific communities. We don't often have the opportunity. Often it's our leaders who are saying things on our behalf. And this is a really great idea that the Australian audience can engage in, become aware, get informed, and discuss amongst yourselves. Because the fact is, Australia is a country that we look to. 10 or so years ago, when I used to travel to Australia, I was very much in my sort of post-university days, still very radical, wanting to change the world. I used to come down to Canberra and talk to my Angel friends and says, well, let me just remind Australia that you are in our backyard. You are in the Pacific Ocean. But I mean it when I say the Pacific Islands region is a place we must all make to call it home for all of us. On the behalf of our Pacific people, especially the voiceless and the marginalized communities, I thank you for this opportunity to be represented here tonight. I thank you.